Director Bong Joon-ho's monster movie. It's 2006's The Host. Let me tell you why I think this is an underrated, underappreciated movie, why I really like it, and how you might see things in it coming up next. I'm calling this movie underrated because while online the aggregate ratings are okay on, say, imdb.com or Letterboxd, whenever I pull up the top science fiction movies ever made, any list whatsoever, I rarely actually see The Host even on the list, say top 50, top 100 all time. So for example, I just went to Google's homepage, searched for best science fiction movies ever, looked at the top lists. None of them had The Host in their list, and we're talking top 100, top 150 movie lists, but I myself have it in the top 20, 25, top 30 science fiction movies ever. I think this is an intricate and rich drama, but it's also very funny. It's a black comedy. In fact, it's very hard to label because there's so many different tones and ideas coming together in this blend of a monster movie. Bong Joon-ho's aesthetic is to blend all kinds of movies he's watched and seen, I think loved as well. And you're going to see Alien in this, certainly Godzilla, because the movie starts out with Godzilla references, although Godzilla is of course Japanese, this is Korean, but the similar thing where there's an American influence that changes everything within a nation, like Japan for Godzilla, here it's Korea. And at the very beginning, it's a very overt, even kind of funny scene to me because it's so stock and tropish, where an old American gentleman says, "Dump dirty formaldehyde down the drain and into the Han River," and he tells us to his younger Korean associate, while all the formaldehyde is dumped down the drain, we see endless amounts of bottles, which result in a mutant, which is the monster in the movie. That's not unlike Godzilla, where radioactive testing, or actually nuclear bomb testing, creates the monster Godzilla, which ravages Japan in the early Godzilla movies. So that's the case in the monster, which somehow mutates and evolves and becomes a terrorizing monster along the Han River in Korea. I think the movie has a subtle nod to video games as well. Remember, this came out in 2006. There's 20-some years of video games here, where a little girl, actually the daughter of Gong-do, who's the main character, one of the main characters in this movie, is taken by the monster, taken by the tail, and taken into the sewer next to the Han River, actually near or under a bridge. And so one of the main points of the movie, easy plot point, is go and rescue the little girl or the princess from the big bad boss figure. That's what's going to happen in the movie. We know that's the case. That allows the movie's vast middle, though, to meander and sometimes go far away from that plot goal, unlike a video game or a platform game where you're always going towards the goal, which is to defeat the boss and rescue the princess. You know, this movie diverges away from that several times, and that makes it more interesting because then it becomes a social, political critique, lots of psychology involved here, lots of Korean culture, comments on that. And so this movie is a melange of topics, really interesting tapestry that is worth, you can analyze it from any perspective, political perspective, geopolitical or internal to Korea, economic, and also social, and also psychological, familial, and so on. There's all kinds of aspects blended in this movie. One reason why I really like it, it's inherently complex. So one of those ways that it goes away from the plot is that you have commentary on viral outbreaks in East Asia, say SARS or the coronavirus. And of course, this movie comes out 14, 15 years before the coronavirus pandemic of 2020, 2021. You know, and it works as a comment on that. But of course, way before that, they had SARS outbreaks and different viral outbreaks in East Asia. And so how was the government handling that is one kind of question in this movie, along with what's America's influence on Korean culture. I think the movie very wonderfully depicts how the government authorities, who I think almost solely in this movie are absurd authoritarians. This movie has E.T. and Clockwork Orange, or the nasty parts of E.T. where E.T. is taken by the government agents. Clockwork Orange as well. There's several shots that look Kubrickian in this movie about a worry about institutions, government authority, when some kind of tragedy or disaster happens. Here in this case, there is one monster attack along the Han River, and immediately the government rounds up all the people involved in it, and then says there's a virus. Well, of course, we never see the virus in the movie with the people involved with the monster, and this could be elaborate hoax. There's more on that later in the movie, but they round up everybody and corral them and then basically imprison them and use them as scientific experiments. That's at least the saga of the main character Gong-do in this movie. And so not just the Americans are ragged on, as in early in the movie when the old man orders the formaldehyde poured down the drain. The Korean authorities, I think, are really pretty bad here. Overall, I get a bad rap. And then the core movie is the nuclear family that owns that booth next to the Han River where they sell goods, and especially eatery goods, which is a very important idea in this movie. Food and eating is all over the movie. The monster eating people or grabbing people and might eat them. And then this concept of Seo-ri, which is named a couple times in this movie. The older generation knows what it is, the younger don't. This is about children taking food when they're poor and starving from, say, fields because they need the food. And that is in the movie with maybe the monster is what doing that to the people because it needs to eat, of course. And then the question of how much commercialization and consumer culture is ruining Korea versus the value of eating together or having basic Korean staple foods, for example. There's also the theme of mothers or no mothers in this movie, which is sort of disturbing and sort of not, and that's a nod to Alien or Aliens, which has Alien has the mothership named Mother, and then the alien mother in the movie Aliens, which this monster kind of sort of resembles. And I have to say this, and you may disagree with this, but the monster's mouth is sort of vaginal in this movie as it sucks in its victims or spits them out, and then puts them in this sort of nest where it might eat people, but also is just protecting them, perhaps. It's hard to tell. This monster gets a little bit more complex, as monster movies tend to do when you see more of the monster and what it's up to. It's an alien creature rather than just a predator, perhaps. But Gong-do's wife has left, and then leaving him with his daughter. Then we hear about Gong-do's own mother has left or departed. And so this movie is about women who are not there for their children, which may be a commentary on Korean culture, I'm not sure, but the monster is this weird and warped substitute for the mother. But there's sort of a father versus mother thing going on in the movie, perhaps, with Gong-do versus the monster who has taken his daughter from him. This movie is full of different tonal registers. There's the somber and the serious. There's a couple of funeral moments in the movie, and yet it's farcical. It's absurd. Gong-do is kind of dull, maybe, slow-witted, dim-witted, but yet you root for him, but yet he's stupid. So you have that sort of moralization of authorities as bad, lording it over Gong-do. You root for Gong-do to take care of the monster, and he's kind of a greedy, gluttonous sort of guy who eats the squid leg early in the movie from the customer who should have the squid leg. So the movie's sort of hierarchy of values, Gong-do is a goofball Korean, representative goofball Korean, but then you have the Korean authorities who are lording it over him, even lobotomizing him, and then the Americans, or international government beyond that, later in the movie releasing this Agent Yellow, totally reminiscent of the Vietnam War Agent Orange. I have no idea if there's really some kind of Agent Yellow that takes out all biological creatures within several kilometers, but they released that later in the movie, and they used that, and of course it's the American influence over Korea, and the idea of stopping pandemics, viral outbreaks, and so on, which is really interesting, this movie, because actually the problem is the monster, but yet the authorities invent another disaster and then ignore the monster. A lot of scenes take place near the Han River, in this local area where the family booth is and the bridge, and nobody's going after the monster except the nuclear family. Where are the government authorities at? So that's part of the farce and the satire, deep and rich satire, I think, on existing authority structures in Korea. There's also the motif of diving into the river, falling down, the rain motif as well, all over the movie, falling water, both rain and snow. And early in the movie, poignant scene, really interesting, where a suicide jumps off the bridge and claims he sees something in the water and then calls his fellows who are trying to stop him idiots. This diving in the water motif happens several times, along with a monster who dives into the water. So the difference between above the air and below the air, above the surface and below the surface. I think that's the MO of Bong Joon-ho's movies, in fact, is to, you look at them, we have to ask some questions, look below the surface, ask where are they going to? What are the depths that they have in them? And I think this movie has a lot of riches, like his other movies, say, for example, Memories of a Murder. I do think some viewers will find that the tonal shifts in this movie are just too wild and crazy, and they don't work together. That's perfectly fair viewing this movie. I actually love it. I love how it blends things together. It makes me laugh all the way through. It's a very funny movie in a black humor sense, but it's also poignant. I love that it drives home through the main plot goal. and alludes to all kinds of science fiction movies, as I've said in this video. So for my money, it's one of the best science fiction movies I've seen so far in the 21st century. And that's why I think it's underrated and should be on more science fiction or best of science fiction lists. But what do you all think? Now remember, this is the 2006 version of The Host. There are other Hosts movies out there, so look this one up, 2006. Let us know in the comments what you think. Subscribe to this channel for more great content. Thank you and have a great day.